A police officer was driving home with her young son when they stopped at a quiet street corner. A ragged man stood there holding a torn sign that read, $10 for the mutt. Behind him lay an old German shepherd, trembling, ribs showing, one ear bent. The boy tugged his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, please, we can't just leave him." She almost said no, until the dog lifted his eyes and something inside her shattered, because those eyes, she had seen them before. What happened next will make you cry and believe in second chances again. Before we start, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The afternoon light spilled softly over Cedar Falls, a quiet mountain town nestled at the edge of the Colorado foothills. The air held that crisp stillness of early autumn, the kind where every breeze carried both warmth and the scent of pine. Golden leaves fluttered along the main street, brushing against red brick storefronts and the fading blue of an old post office. It was the kind of small town that wore its silence like an old coat, familiar, slightly frayed, but comforting. Rachel Hayes walked slowly down Main Street, her boots tapping a calm rhythm on the cracked sidewalk. At 35, she had the posture of someone trained never to let her guard down, tall, lean, shoulders squared from years in uniform. Her dark brown hair was tied into a low ponytail beneath a navy police cap, and faint lines traced the corners of her gray-blue eyes. To most, she was the kind of woman who could face down danger without flinching, yet tonight her face looked tired, the weariness of a soldier long after the war had ended. 3 years ago, that war had been personal. Her husband, Daniel Hayes, a decorated K-9 officer, had died in a drug bust gone wrong, leaving behind his badge, a folded flag, and their 6-year-old son, Liam. Since then, Rachel had worn resilience like armor, every emotion carefully locked behind duty. She smiled for Liam's sake, but her eyes rarely softened. Liam walked beside her now, humming under his breath, his small sneakers crunching over the fallen leaves. He was 10, with hair the color of burnt wheat and a face that still carried the roundness of childhood. His gray eyes mirrored his mother's, but where hers were guarded, his were wide and endlessly curious. He wore a light gray hoodie, one sleeve slightly torn, and clutched a paper cup of hot cocoa in both hands. "Mom," he said, looking up at her, "you promised we'd get pumpkin pie from Patty's Diner." Rachel smiled faintly, the corner of her lips twitching. "We will, buddy. Patty doesn't close till 6. They passed the hardware store, its window filled with dusty paint cans and "for sale" signs, and turned the corner toward the old bus stop. That was when Rachel saw him, the man sitting hunched by the lamp-post. He looked like a remnant of some forgotten life. Mid-50s, thin to the bone, his gray beard matted and unkempt. His jacket hung loose, the fabric stained and torn, and a wool cap sat crooked on his head. Beside him was a piece of cardboard scrawled with black marker, $10 for the mutt. Rachel slowed, frowning. Behind the sign, tied with a fraying rope to a rusted shopping cart, was a German shepherd. The dog lay motionless except for the slow rise and fall of its ribs. Its fur was dull and dirty, the once majestic black and tan pattern now clouded with grime. One ear stood tall, the other drooped awkwardly, broken long ago. When it shifted, the trembling of its hind leg betrayed an old injury. Liam froze. "Mom." His voice softened to a whisper. "Look at him." Rachel's instinct kicked in. Police training, practicality. "Stay back," she said quietly. "We don't know if he's safe." But the boy had already crouched down, his cocoa cup forgotten on the curb. He leaned forward, eyes wide, as if the world had narrowed to that fragile creature on the sidewalk. "He's not dangerous," Liam murmured. "He's sad." Rachel sighed. "Liam." Then the dog lifted its head. Their eyes met, the woman and the broken animal. In that gaze, something cracked open inside her chest. The eyes were dark, liquid brown, ringed with exhaustion, yet filled with a quiet defiance. She had seen eyes like that once before, in the photo that still sat on her nightstand, the last picture of Daniel with his K-9 partner before they went out on their final call. She swallowed hard, forcing the thought away. Coincidence, she told herself. Just coincidence. The man by the lamppost shifted, grunting. $10, officer, that's all. He ain't good for nothing now. Eats too much, sleeps all day. His voice was rough, slurred with fatigue or drink. Rachel's eyes narrowed. What's wrong with him? Old, the man said. And stupid. Not worth feeding. Liam looked up at his mother. Mom, please, we can help him. Rachel hesitated. The wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of rain and distant pine smoke. She reached instinctively for her wallet, then stopped. Liam, we don't have the time or space for... The boy's small hand wrapped around her wrist. We can't just leave him here. Please. The plea in his voice, the same desperate kindness Daniel had once had, made her chest ache. Rachel crouched down, studying the dog again. What's his name? The man snorted. Don't know. Don't care. Liam's jaw tightened. Then I'll name him. Rachel took out a $10 bill, folding it between her fingers. If I give you this, he's ours. The man's grin was quick and crooked. Deal. He snatched the money and stuffed it into his pocket, rising to his feet with surprising speed. Before Rachel could even ask where he'd gotten the dog, he was already walking away, limping fast, disappearing around the corner as if the ground were on fire beneath his boots. She frowned, watching him vanish. That was... odd. Liam didn't notice. He was kneeling beside the dog, brushing dirt off its muzzle. Hey, buddy, he whispered. You're safe now. The shepherd's tail twitched, barely, and a weak sigh escaped its throat. Rachel's breath softened. All right, she said quietly. But he's your responsibility. You help me care for him. Liam looked up, his face breaking into a smile so bright it pushed back the fading sun. Yes, ma'am. He thought for a moment, then said proudly, I'll call him Duke, because he looks like a protector, like a knight from the old stories. Rachel couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at her lips. Duke it is. She bent to untie the fraying rope from the cart. The moment her hand brushed the dog's neck, she froze. Underneath the matted fur was a faint groove, the mark of a collar long removed, or perhaps one worn for years. The texture was rough, scarred skin against her fingertips. Duke didn't flinch. He simply looked up at her, quiet, patient, trusting. Something twisted inside her chest again, something half grief, half recognition. Come on, Duke, Liam said gently. Let's go home. The boy led the dog slowly toward their car. Rachel followed, her eyes still scanning the corner where the stranger had stood. The lamppost light flickered faintly against the dusk. The man was gone, as if he had never existed. When she turned back, Duke had stopped beside Liam's leg, pressing his muzzle softly against the boy's palm. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of a silent promise. Rachel watched them both, her son and the old shepherd, walking together down the quiet street of Cedar Falls, framed by drifting leaves and the last light of day. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was walking alone. The next morning came quietly, the kind of still dawn where the forest behind the Hayes house hummed with the low rhythm of waking life. The sunlight pressed gently against the curtains, spilling across the worn wooden floors of Rachel's modest home at the edge of the woods. Steam rose from her coffee cup, mingling with the faint smell of pine and soap. The house wasn't large, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a porch that creaked whenever the wind shifted, but it was hers, and lately that seemed like enough. Duke lay curled near the door, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The old German shepherd had barely made a sound since they brought him home the day before. His fur was still dull, matted with dirt, and when he moved, his hind leg trembled slightly, as though every step reminded him of a pain that refused to fade. But his eyes, deep, alert, and impossibly intelligent, tracked every motion Rachel made. She could feel it. Liam was already up, sitting cross-legged on the porch steps, still in his pajamas. The early light caught the strands of his light brown hair as he sketched in his worn notebook. A stub of pencil moved carefully across the page. Not messy child's doodles, but deliberate, steady lines. The boy was sketching Duke, his small hand tracing the outline of the shepherd's bent ear, the ribs that pressed faintly against his coat, the proud yet gentle curve of his neck. When Rachel stepped outside, he looked up, grinning. "I'm making him look strong again," Liam said, "like he used to be." Rachel smiled faintly and sat beside him. "That's good, bud. Maybe he'll see it and remember who he was." Inside, she filled a bucket with warm water and found the half-used bottle of dog shampoo from years ago, the one that still had Daniel's handwriting on the label. Her breath caught for a second, fingers pausing over the bottle. Then she shook it off. Duty first. "Come on, Duke," she called softly. The dog rose slowly, cautious, but when Liam knelt beside the bucket and patted the ground, Duke approached without hesitation. The boy's patience, the softness in his voice, it worked like magic. Rachel crouched beside them, rolling up her sleeves, and began to wash the grime from Duke's coat. As the dirt ran off, scars began to emerge, faint lines across the ribs, a puckered patch beneath the collarbone, and one long, jagged groove circling his neck like an invisible chain. Rachel's jaw tightened. "What happened to him, Mom?" Liam asked, touching one of the marks gently. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. "Someone hurt him. For a long time." The boy frowned, eyes glistening. "But why?" "There are people," Rachel said after a pause, "who see strength and think it's theirs to break." Duke shifted under her hand but didn't flinch. He simply stared into the distance, toward the forest, as if remembering a world that neither of them could see. By mid-morning, the old shepherd was clean, wrapped in a towel and lying near the fireplace. His fur, though thin, now showed glimpses of its former sheen. Liam had moved to the kitchen table, sketching again, this time drawing Duke standing tall beside a police cruiser. Rachel pretended not to notice, though her heart twisted at the image. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The name on the screen made her exhale sharply. Sergeant Tom Garner. Garner had been her superior, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with weathered skin and eyes that hid more regret than authority. He had a reputation for being fair, but blunt. Rachel respected him, but lately his voice carried a weight she'd come to dread. She picked up. "Sir?" "Morning, Hayes," he said, the sound of static behind him suggesting he was calling from the precinct parking lot. "Heard you're back home. Just for a few days. I needed time." "You've got it," he said. "Internal review's still ongoing. Until then, stay off duty." Rachel's fingers tightened on the phone. The investigation, the one that had left her suspended, wasn't something she liked to revisit. A month ago, a routine arrest had gone wrong. A suspect had lunged unexpectedly, and Rachel's split-second decision had resulted in her partner, Officer Morales, taking a bullet meant for her. Morales had survived, but barely. The guilt clung to her like smoke. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "Listen," Garner continued, his tone softening. "I know you, Hayes. Don't let this bury you. And get some rest. You sound like you've been up all night." "I'll be fine." When the call ended, she stared out the window for a long time. The forest outside was a patchwork of gold and shadow. She almost didn't notice the sound. Faint, distant, the hum of an engine idling somewhere beyond the fence line. She stepped onto the porch. The driveway was empty except for her patrol SUV, but near the far corner of the property, just beyond the tall pines, the gravel looked disturbed. Faint tire marks, fresh, cutting across the damp soil. Her gut tightened. "Liam," she called. The boy appeared at the doorway. "Yeah?" "Stay inside with Duke, okay?" "Why? What's wrong?" "Just do it." She scanned the tree line, one hand resting instinctively on her hip, though there was no holster there now, not while suspended. The wind rustled the leaves, but no one appeared. Whoever had been there was gone. By late afternoon, clouds began to roll in from the west. Rain tapped gently on the porch roof as Rachel sat inside with her laptop open, reading old case files, half out of habit, half out of obsession. Duke lay beside her chair, ears twitching whenever the thunder muttered in the distance. Liam sat across the room with his colored pencils, shading the forest green in his drawing. "Mom," he said suddenly, "you think Duke used to be a police dog?" Rachel looked up. "Why do you say that?" "The way he moves," Liam said. "When he hears a sound, he sits up straight like he's waiting for a command. And when I dropped my pencil earlier, he brought it to me. He didn't fetch it like a game. He carried it careful, like it mattered." Rachel's gaze drifted to Duke. The shepherd had indeed perked up at every sound since morning. The hum of the fridge, the knock of rain, the faint rattle of the gate outside. He didn't just react. He assessed, watched, calculated. "It's possible," she murmured. "Some K9s are retired early if they're injured or if their handlers are gone." Liam hesitated. "Like Dad's partner?" Her throat tightened. "Yeah," she said softly. "Like him." There was silence for a moment, the kind that held too much memory. Then Duke rose, padding slowly to Liam's side. The boy reached out, scratching behind his ear. The dog's tail wagged once, slow but certain. That evening, Rachel tried to lose herself in routine. Dinner, dishes, feeding the dog, but the marks in the yard kept gnawing at her thoughts. She stepped outside once more before bed. The rain had stopped, leaving the earth dark and soft beneath her boots. Under the porch light, she crouched near the fence line where she'd seen the tire tracks earlier. The mud bore a clear impression. Tread from a heavy vehicle, maybe a truck, too close to her property for coincidence. She stood still, listening. Somewhere beyond the trees, a branch snapped. She turned sharply, heart quickening. Nothing moved, only the forest, whispering secrets to itself. When she returned inside, Duke was waiting by the door, tail still but eyes alert. He padded toward her, pressing his muzzle against her palm. Rachel knelt, brushing his fur gently. "You hear it, too, don't you?" she whispered. The shepherd blinked slowly, the kind of knowing blink that felt like an answer. Later that night, long after Liam had fallen asleep, Rachel sat alone in the living room. The fire had burned down to embers. Duke slept near her feet, the scar around his neck glinting faintly in the firelight. On the coffee table lay Liam's newest drawing, Duke standing tall beside a police badge, under it written in a child's handwriting, "Every hero has scars." Rachel leaned back in her chair, staring at the picture until her eyes blurred. For the first time since her suspension, she let herself smile. Not out of peace, but recognition. Maybe they were all a little like Duke, scarred, lost, but still standing. Outside, the forest wind rose again, carrying with it a low, unfamiliar hum, the sound of an engine idling somewhere in the dark. The storm arrived just after midnight. Wind hissed through the pine trees, and the house creaked as if something enormous pressed its weight against the walls. Rachel had just drifted into uneasy sleep when the first bark came, sharp, guttural, and desperate. Duke's voice tore through the silence like an alarm. He was downstairs, claws scraping against the hardwood. Then came a second bark, deeper, louder, vibrating with a kind of urgency that froze her heart. She shot upright, reaching instinctively for her flashlight. "Liam!" she called, already halfway down the hall. The boy stumbled from his room in flannel pajamas, eyes wide, clutching his sketchbook to his chest. "What's wrong?" "Stay here," she ordered, but he was already following her down the stairs. In the living room, Duke was at the door, fur bristled, tail stiff, growl rumbling low from his chest. His gaze was locked on the window that faced the forest. Beyond it, nothing moved, only the sway of branches under the wind, but Rachel's instincts screamed otherwise. When she unlatched the door, Duke lunged into the darkness without hesitation. "Duke!" she shouted, grabbing her flashlight and jacket. "Stay behind me, Liam." The boy nodded, but didn't hide his fear. They stepped into the storm. The cold rain hit their faces like shards of glass, the beam of light slicing through the night in thin silver lines. Duke's barking echoed ahead, guiding them through the mud path that led into the woods behind the property. Rachel's boots sank deep into the earth with every step, her breath visible in the cold air. The forest loomed around them, ancient pines, black shadows, and the rhythmic drip of rain through the canopy. Then she saw it, a faint glow flickering between the trees like a dying lantern. Duke was there, standing in front of an old building Rachel hadn't seen in years, a decrepit warehouse left from Cedar Falls logging days. The sign above the rusted door barely clung to its bolts, half covered by ivy. "Mom," Liam whispered, trembling. "What is this place?" "Old industrial zone," she said. "Used to store timber back when the mill was still running. No one's been here for years." But Duke didn't seem to care about history. He growled again, pushing against the door until the hinges groaned. The smell hit them first, the stench of decay, iron, and something acrid like old chemicals. Rachel covered Liam's nose with her sleeve. "Stay close," she murmured, raising the flashlight. Inside, the light swept across a scene that made her stomach twist. Rows of rusted cages lined the walls, some collapsed, others hanging open. Chains dangled from hooks in the ceiling. On the floor, bits of bone and shredded fabric lay scattered in damp dust. The smell of rot was suffocating. Duke's body stiffened. A low whine escaped his throat. Rachel's flashlight caught movement, a rat darting across the corner. And then, something else, glinting under a broken table. She crouched, wiping away grime until the metal shape became clear, an old padlocked safe, rusted but intact. Duke nosed it once, then looked at her as if insisting she open it. "Who would leave this here?" she muttered, running her fingers over the surface. Her training kicked in. Serial number, latch type, weight estimate, habit she couldn't unlearn. The safe wasn't large, maybe the size of a small microwave, but heavy. She spotted a crowbar lying nearby, its handle corroded but usable. "Liam, don't move from that spot," she said, gripping the bar and prying at the lock. Metal groaned in protest. On the third strike, the latch snapped. Inside was a pile of mildewed papers sealed in plastic. She unfolded the top sheet, squinting under the beam. At the top, the faded header read, "K9 Program, Cedar Falls Division, terminated." Beneath it were typewritten lines of assignments, handler IDs, and names of dogs, many marked with red X's. She flipped to the next page and froze. One entry was circled. ID CF-221. Handler, Officer Daniel Hayes. Status, missing in action. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Daniel Hayes, her late husband. Her knees weakened as memories surged. The night the department called her, the sterile voice over the line telling her Daniel's K9 unit had gone missing after a narcotics raid gone wrong. His partner dog, never found. They'd said the file was closed. She stared at the page again. CF-221. Duke's age matched perfectly. "Mom?" Liam's voice quivered. "What's wrong?" She swallowed hard. "Nothing, sweetheart," she said, though her voice betrayed her. "Let's head home." On the way back, Duke kept close to her side, silent, steady. Rain tapered off, leaving mist that hung low over the ground. When they reached the porch, Rachel glanced back toward the forest one last time. For a moment, she thought she saw headlights flash between the trees, but when she blinked, the darkness swallowed them whole. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen window like nothing had happened. The house smelled of coffee and damp clothes drying by the stove. Rachel sat at the table, the stack of documents spread before her. The official tone of the K9 program files did little to hide their implications. The program had been shut down quietly, its dogs reassigned or disposed of after injuries. Duke, if he really was CF-221, hadn't been retired. He'd been written off. The phone rang again, breaking her thoughts. Sergeant Garner. "Morning, Hayes." His voice came through, rough but calm. "You all right? Heard you were asking around about old K9 records." Rachel's spine stiffened. "I found something, sir. Documents from a decommissioned facility north of town. It lists my husband's unit as terminated. But Duke, he matches one of the IDs." A pause. Then Garner sighed. "Rachel, listen, those files should have been destroyed years ago. You're not supposed to have them." "Why? What are they hiding?" "It's complicated," he said, his tone lowering. "Let it go. Officially, the K9 program's history. Don't dig into this, not now." Her hand trembled slightly. "Sir, if my husband's case was buried with that file, I have a right to know." Garner's voice hardened. "You're still under suspension, Hayes. Don't make me report this. Trust me, it's better if you forget it." The line clicked dead. Rachel stared at the silent phone. "Better if you forget it." Those words felt heavier than any reprimand she'd ever received. She didn't realize Liam had been standing at the kitchen doorway, barefoot, hair messy from sleep. He held his sketchbook close, eyes wide with curiosity. "Mom," he asked softly, "why don't they want you to know?" Rachel hesitated, then managed a weak smile. "Because sometimes grown-ups don't like answers they can't control." Liam frowned. "That's stupid." He sat beside her, looking at the papers, though he didn't understand the details. "If Duke was Dad's dog," he said quietly, "then maybe he came back because he remembered us." Rachel's throat tightened. She looked at Duke, lying on the rug near the door, watching them both with that same steady gaze. "Maybe," she whispered. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy, charged, as if the world was holding its breath. The documents lay between them, a bridge between past and present, between what was buried and what refused to stay dead. That night, Rachel placed the folder inside a metal box under her bed, locking it with the same caution she once reserved for her service weapon. She turned off the lamp and lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Duke slept at the foot of the bed, occasionally twitching in his dreams. In the next room, Liam's nightlight glowed faintly. She heard him whisper to himself, practicing words he'd written earlier on his drawing. "Every hero has scars, even the ones who come back." Downstairs, a car engine started in the distance. The sound faded quickly, but not before Duke's ears pricked up and a low growl rolled from his throat. Morning sunlight poured over Cedar Falls, but it brought no warmth to Rachel's small home. The air felt heavier that day, like the world itself was bracing for something unseen. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, her gaze locked on the rusted metal box she had hidden under her bed the night before. The documents inside, the ones about the terminated K9 program, still pulsed in her mind like a heartbeat she couldn't quiet. Duke lay near the window, his ears twitching even in sleep. Liam was in the living room, sprawled on the rug, sketching Duke and humming softly. For a fleeting moment, things seemed normal, until the knock came. It wasn't a casual knock. It was measured, deliberate. 3 short taps, followed by silence. Rachel stiffened. Few people ever visited her this far out in the woods. She glanced at Duke, who was already on his feet, tail lowered, hackles slightly raised. The knock came again. She opened the door a crack and saw him. A man in his late 50s, tall, weathered, his posture straight like someone who'd spent a lifetime in uniform. His hair was silver gray, combed neatly, but his eyes, pale and unblinking, carried a sharpness that didn't fade with age. He wore a brown leather jacket over a faded military shirt and carried a folded cap under his arm. "Morning, Officer Hayes," he said, voice deep and smooth, with that faint rasp of a smoker. "You may not remember me. Carl Benson. We served in the same division, back when Daniel was still with us. Rachel's stomach tightened. She remembered the name. Captain Carl Benson. He'd led the K-9 division when her husband was alive. But he disappeared shortly after the operation that took Daniel's life. "What do you want, Captain?" she asked, stepping partially outside. Carl smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just wanted to pay my respects. Heard you came into possession of one of our old dogs. Thought I'd see him one last time." Duke appeared beside her, head low, eyes locked on the man. The moment Carl saw him, something flickered in his face. Shock, maybe even recognition. But he hid it fast. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmured. "That's CF-221, isn't it? Daniel's dog. Never thought I'd see him again." Rachel's hand tightened on the doorknob. "You know about the program," she said cautiously. "I ran it," he said. "We gave our dogs purpose. When they were retired, we made sure they went with dignity. I just want to take him, give him a proper burial as he deserves. These animals served their country, Officer Hayes." There was a smoothness to his words, a rhythm too polished, too careful. Rachel had heard that tone before, men trying to sell truth wrapped in lies. "Duke's not going anywhere," she said firmly. "He's home." Carl's expression shifted, subtle but sharp, the friendly mask cracking for half a second. "I understand," he said finally, his voice lowering. "Still, think about it. Some things are best laid to rest." He tipped his head, turned, and walked down the gravel path to a black SUV parked beneath the pines. As he opened the driver's door, Rachel noticed something glint, an insignia tag on his keychain, the old K-9 crest, her husband's division emblem. That afternoon, the house was quiet again, but not peaceful. Rachel checked the locks twice, then a third time. Duke paced the floor near the window, restless, as if the scent of the man still lingered. Liam noticed, too. "Mom, who was that man?" he asked while putting away his sketchbook. "An old colleague," she said, not looking up. "Nothing to worry about." But Liam saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at the tree line outside. Night fell early, clouds swallowing the moon. By midnight, the wind had stilled completely, a silence so thick it made Rachel sit up in bed. Then she heard it, the faintest creak of a floorboard downstairs. Her pulse spiked. She reached instinctively for her sidearm, then remembered it was still locked away, confiscated during her suspension. Duke was already awake, body rigid, eyes reflecting faint light from the window. He growled, low and dangerous. "Stay here," she whispered, though she knew Duke wouldn't. When she opened the bedroom door, Liam stirred in the next room. "Mom?" he murmured sleepily. "Stay in your room," she whispered back. "Don't move, no matter what." The hallway was dark, save for a dim glow from the porch light seeping through the blinds. She crept down the stairs, each step deliberate, controlled. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and wet soil. Duke descended beside her, silent except for the soft tap of his claws. Then came the sound, a window sliding open. Rachel moved fast. "Hey!" she shouted, flipping the hallway light switch. The figure froze halfway through the window frame. A man, dressed in black, ski mask pulled tight. For a heartbeat, they both stood still. Then Duke lunged. The shepherd hit the intruder with the force of a storm, teeth sinking into fabric and flesh. The man screamed, tumbling backward into the kitchen. Glass shattered. Rachel grabbed a metal flashlight from the counter and swung hard, striking the man's shoulder. He shoved her back, reaching for something in his pocket. Rachel braced to strike again, but Duke was faster. He lunged for the man's wrist, knocking whatever weapon he held clattering to the floor. "Mom!" Liam's voice echoed from the stairs. "I called 911, but it cut off." "Get back upstairs," she shouted. The intruder kicked Duke off and bolted toward the back door. Rachel dove, grabbing his jacket. They crashed into the table, scattering papers, photos, and mugs. She caught a glimpse of his eyes, dark, wild, terrified. Then, as he twisted free, something fell from his pocket onto the floor. A leather collar, old and worn, its brass tag gleaming faintly in the kitchen light. By the time she looked up, he was gone, out the door into the darkness beyond the porch. Duke limped slightly as he returned to her side, panting, his muzzle speckled with blood that wasn't his. Rachel scooped up the collar with trembling hands. The brass tag read only 2 words, Unit X-12. Her stomach dropped. X-212, Daniel's unit. Duke had been with that same team when her husband died. Police sirens finally echoed faintly in the distance, but the night no longer felt safe. Liam clung to her side when the officers arrived, a pair of local deputies she barely knew. They scanned the damage, took notes, muttered about random break-ins, and promised to send a report. When they left, the house returned to silence. Rachel stood by the window, collar still in her hand. Duke sat beside her, eyes fixed on the tree line where the man had vanished. "This isn't random," she whispered. Liam leaned against her leg. "Was it that man from this morning?" Rachel didn't answer, but she knew the truth. Carl Benson had come looking for Duke, and when she refused, he'd sent someone else to take him. The rain started again, faint but steady, tapping against the glass. Rachel reached down, brushing her hand across Duke's fur. His ears flicked, his body still tense. "Whatever they did to you," she murmured, "we're going to find out." Outside, in the distance beyond the trees, the faint glimmer of headlights appeared, then vanished again into the dark. Morning broke through the mist like a promise. The town of Cedar Falls awoke to the sound of sirens echoing faintly through the valley, signaling the beginning of something far greater than an ordinary day. Rachel stood outside her small cabin, the collar marked Unit X-12, clenched in her hand. The wind rustled through the pines, cool and solemn. Duke stood beside her, the black and tan German shepherd's fur still rough from the fight the night before. One ear slightly torn, but his stance proud, his gaze unwavering. Liam, sleepy-eyed and pale but brave, watched from the porch, clutching his sketchbook. By noon, Rachel had made the call she'd been avoiding. She met with Sergeant Garner in person at the Cedar Falls police station. Garner, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with silvering hair and a hard jaw, was waiting for her with folded arms. His eyes, usually steady, betrayed guilt. He knew this had gone too far. "I told you to leave it," he said quietly. "And I told you I wouldn't," Rachel replied, laying the collar on his desk. "This was found in my home last night after an intruder attacked us. That man, Carl Benson, he's not just hiding something. He's running a trafficking ring. Dogs from the terminated K-9 program. He's been selling them to labs, Garner, for experiments." Garner's jaw tightened. "You have proof?" Rachel pulled out her phone, showing him the documents she photographed from the safe, along with a blurred security image she caught from her porch camera. A black SUV parked near her property. The license plate matched Carl's old government-issued vehicle. Garner's expression shifted from denial to dread. Within the hour, the department mobilized. A tactical team was assembled, joined by a local animal welfare officer named Marie Dalton, a woman in her early 40s with short blonde hair and sharp green eyes softened by kindness. She had spent years rescuing abandoned animals and was known for her calm but fierce compassion. "We move at dawn," she said. "If those dogs are alive, they don't have much time left." The location Duke had found before, the warehouse, turned out to be just one site. A second facility sat deeper in the forest, hidden beneath the abandoned Cedar Falls logging grounds. That's where they would find Carl Benson. The following morning, fog rolled thick across the ground as the convoy of black SUVs and police trucks rumbled down the dirt road. Rachel, though technically still suspended, sat in the lead vehicle. Garner had given a simple nod. "You started this, you end it." Duke rode beside her, his amber eyes focused out the window. He seemed to know. His body was tense but ready, his breathing calm. Liam had begged to come, but Rachel left him in town under watch, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Be proud of him," she told her son. "He's doing what he was born to do." When they reached the compound, the stench hit. First, metal, waste, and something darker. Rachel's heart clenched. Beyond the gates were rows of cages, each holding dogs of different breeds, sizes, and colors, their fur matted, eyes hollow with fear. Duke let out a low growl that built into a bark so loud it cut through the fog. The other dogs stirred, whimpering, tails twitching. "Go!" Garner shouted, and the team fanned out. The officers broke locks, cut chains, and guided the terrified animals toward waiting vans. Rachel and Duke pushed through to the largest shed, where she knew Carl would be. Inside, Carl Benson stood at a desk littered with files, money, and tranquilizer syringes. His face was pale but defiant. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, drawing a pistol. Rachel didn't flinch. "You used them. You took loyal partners and turned them into profit." "They were government property," Carl snapped. "Just like your husband, just like that dog." Before Rachel could respond, Duke lunged forward. The movement startled Carl, and the gun fired, a single deafening shot. Rachel dropped behind a metal crate, her ears ringing. Duke yelped but kept going, tackling Carl to the ground. The gun clattered away. Carl struggled, swinging his arm, but Duke's jaws clamped down on his wrist. Garner burst in seconds later, weapon raised. "It's over, Carl," Garner barked, but Carl only laughed weakly, blood pooling beneath him. "You think this stops with me? You have no idea who signed those papers." His voice trailed off as Garner snapped handcuffs onto his wrists. Rachel rushed to Duke. The shepherd was down, breathing hard, a shallow graze along his shoulder where the bullet had grazed. "You're okay," she whispered, pressing her hand against his fur. "You're okay, soldier." His tail thumped faintly in reply. Hours later, the rescued dogs were loaded into transport vehicles bound for shelters and clinics across the state. News crews arrived. Cedar Falls hadn't seen a story like this in decades. Corruption, redemption, and the return of a hero dog who once vanished into the dark. Carl Benson was taken into custody, facing charges for animal cruelty, trafficking, and obstruction. Garner publicly reinstated Rachel to her position, standing beside her at the press conference. "Officer Hayes uncovered what others were too afraid to face," he said, "and because of her and that dog, dozens of lives were saved." A week later, the town gathered at the old courthouse lawn. The mayor unveiled a small bronze plaque engraved with the words, "For those who serve without speaking, for those who love without condition." Beside it stood Duke, healed and calm, tail wagging slowly as children reached out to pet him. Liam stood proudly next to his mother, beaming. Months passed. The scandal faded, but the story didn't. Donations poured in from across the state. With the money, Rachel founded a rescue and rehabilitation center, Haven for Heroes. It was built on the very land that once held the illegal kennel. The grand opening drew people from all over. Rows of kennels now held dogs that would be retrained as therapy companions, service animals, and protectors. During her speech, Rachel stood at the podium beneath a soft golden sunset, Duke sitting faithfully by her side, Liam holding a framed drawing of the two of them. Her voice carried through the quiet crowd. "We often think we saved these animals," she said. "But the truth is, they save us. They remind us that love, loyalty, and forgiveness aren't weaknesses, they're miracles in motion." Applause followed, and for a brief moment she looked toward the sky, whispering a name only she could hear, Daniel, and felt peace wash over her like the light through the pines. Later that evening, as the last of the visitors left, Duke lay near the gate, eyes half closed, tail brushing the grass. The sign above him gleamed under the fading light, Haven for Heroes, where love comes home. Rachel knelt beside him, resting a hand on his head. "We did it," she murmured. We brought the light back to Cedar Falls. Duke's ears flicked, and a soft bark rose, carried away by the evening breeze. And somewhere beyond the horizon, perhaps even heaven itself, it felt like an old K-9 officer and his handler were finally reunited in spirit, watching over the heroes who still walked the earth. Sometimes miracles don't come from heaven in thunder or light. They come on 4 legs, covered in fur, carrying hearts that never give up on love. Rachel's story reminds us that redemption can start with compassion, and that faith, like loyalty, always finds its way back. If you believe love can still heal the broken and bring light to the lost, share this story. Comment Amen to honor those who give everything without asking anything in return. And may God bless every viewer who believes in second chances, for people, for animals, and for hope itself.